Brother Carter?
I was getting a little nap in there.
Were you getting a little nap?
Yeah,
We're the only two in so far.
It's been a tough day. My mother, 94-year-old mother, fell.
Oh no.
Yeah, and fortunately, she only broke her thumb.
Jesus.
But
Where is she? Is she with you or she's home?
No, she's in Thomaston.
She's in Thomas. Okay.
Yeah, it's only about 35 miles from here.
Yeah.
But
so you've already been down?
Oh yeah. Well, she fell yesterday.
Oh my goodness.
Didn't tell me until about 9 o'clock last night. There's a niece that's with her. The niece got her up. None of them called. They called my brother in South Carolina.
But didn't call you?
No.
Oh my goodness.
So when I called at 9 o'clock, when they called me at 9 o'clock, told me what happened, I said, did you go to the hospital? No, I'm fine. No problem. I said, no, you need to go to the hospital and check it out. Yeah. I said, have the niece to take you. And she says, okay, I'll do that. And I said, but I'll be down there first thing in the morning. As soon as I got there, hadn't been to the doctor, hands swollen.
Oh, goodness. There's something about mothers and not wanting to tell their sons. My mother had a similar fall at the church. She was taking her stockings off her shoes and she fell. And the first thing she told my sister, don't tell Skip, I'm gonna be okay, you know. But they had to call 911 because she hit her head. And so my sister had enough sense to call me and tell me that she had fallen and that they were taking her to one of the hospitals just to do a CAT scan or something to make sure there was no injury or damage. Thankfully it wasn't, but I don't know what it was. She said, well, I told Dion not to tell you. I said, Mama, I need to know.
I need to know.
Yeah.
I really should have followed my mind and gone last night. I don't drive at night, but
okay,
I should have gone last night and taken her. But fortunately, they thought maybe something made her hip, but hip was fine. The X-ray showed the hip was fine.
Okay,
the break in the thumb.
In the finger thumb, yeah. Well, what a blessing to still have them, you know?
Absolutely. 94, going strong.
I learned so much about you and your family in your book. Well, I said, I thought I knew a little bit about John Carter, but oh my goodness.
You didn't know I sold moonshine?
That was a wonderful, just the whole book was great.
Well, thank you.
Now you got to get it on Audible.
Everybody keeps telling me that. And
you got to narrate that book, John, and get it on Audible.
I just don't.
For those of us who are up and down the road, we like to hear it read. You know?
Everybody has told me that. And
you should. Yeah.
Brothers, how are you?
I'm
hey,
good,
Brother Hairston, how you doing?
Doing okay. Sorry about the delays, etc. Trying to get everything together for this evening there.
Okay.
Well,
I think Brother Reeves is going to join us, and then we'll jump into it, and I won't hold too much of your time.
Okay.
Wonderful.
So, but how are you? I heard when I joined in, I heard that Brother Carter was selling moonshine down there in South Georgia.
You got to get his book. Do you have his book?
I read the book. So I started.
Oh, you read the book?
Good. When I was in Florida, so I got some the rest to get through it. But yeah, but I'm enjoying what I'm reading thus far.
Man,
yeah.
All right.
Susan's brother turned 80 April 1st, and we all went. They rented a house, and we all went down to Florida.
Okay.
And they all brought food and everything else, and so they had this jar with this blue stuff in it. I've never seen moonshine that's blue. But
I haven't either.
Yeah, but well, this my brother-in-law said this guy makes it and he sells it in different flavors and different colors.
Oh my goodness! Don't tell my cousin John Wilder that, because he brings moonshine. He brings moonshine to every family reunion, and cousins are like thirsty seals waiting for a pour. you know.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's sort of like a delicacy, I guess you will.
Well, it is. And our great-great-grandfather, deacon in the church and all of that, was one of the biggest moonshine sellers down in a little place called Yukon, Florida.
Yeah.
Yeah. And my mother's grandmother, my mother's father's mother, she sold moonshine. She operated a restaurant on the beach, Fernandina Beach. One night they raided the restaurant because they knew she was selling. My mother said she must have been about 7, her sister was 8, and brother was about 6. So their grandmother put the moonshine in the bed with them and covered them up, you know, thinking that they would not check the bed. They were all in one bed, you know, and so they had 2 jugs of moonshine. Well, at any rate, they found it. So the front page of the Fernandina Post had something like 2 jugs found at 2 houses, cost 2 pearls. Her name was Pearl, and another Pearl got arrested, $250. So that was a headline for, you know. So when we get together, that's a family story that many of them change, but that one is always consistent.
But you know what happened? She forgot to pay off the share.
I think so.
Yes.
Yeah. This must have been in her early days of selling moonshine.
I remember the sheriff coming by on Friday and my father paying him off.
Really?
Yeah.
And wouldn't mess with them or bother them, huh?
No, that was part of that's why I never got arrested, probably.
Well, I'm sure she learned her lesson.
No, she did. She went right back to selling.
Oh, no, she was still selling.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, she was still selling.
So Brother Reed said he's logging in right now. So,
you know, our people had to do what they had to do.
They had to do what they had to do to make a living.
They sure did, yeah.
So there's Brother Reed. Brother Reeves, can you hear us?
I can.
Brother Reeves, how are you?
I'm all right. Good afternoon.
Hello. Good afternoon, Brother Reeves.
I apologize for my tardiness.
Not a problem.
So brother, General President, Brother Carter, what we're gonna do tonight. First of all, thank you so much for your time. This is an honor and a pleasure for me. So thank you for your time in doing this. What we're gonna do tonight, I'm actually moderating the session, me and Brother Reeves. And so we're gonna record this and we're gonna we're gonna play it tomorrow. I talked with Brother Ford earlier today. We're gonna play it tomorrow during the leadership session, and then of course make it available for brothers. So I did share with both of you in terms of just the topics that we wanted to discuss. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a quick intro for us, and then I'm going to turn it over to both of you, and I'm just going to be popping in and asking some things and talk to us about some things, and we'll go as long as you two want to go. I'll put it that way. It is all right with me. So all right, we ready to rock and roll?
Yes, sir.
All right, so I think we are already recording, and I'll make sure we edit some of those things out because I don't want to walk away with Brother Carter selling moonshine down there. All right. So, all right, and we're starting the recording now. Brothers of Alpha Phi Alpha and the Georgia District, I am overly excited to have in our presence 2 Morris Brown Brownites, Iota Chapter Brothers, Alpha Giants, Alpha Sentinels, Alpha Icons, who have made significant contributions to our fraternity through their service and their leadership. I'm honored to call them my brothers, and I'm humbly honored to call them my mentors and my friends. We have with us none other than our 33rd General President, Brother Reverend Dr. Herman Skip Mason Jr., and the Alpha of Alphas, the author of Protocol and Etiquette, Membership Intake Process, and numerous other Alpha trusted documents, my mentor, my chief pharaoh, and my Alpha dad, none other than the incomparable Brother Dr. John H. Carter. Welcome, brothers.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brother Haston.
So, brothers, if you won't mind, we'll start by saying that, well, first of all, brothers, we're bringing this session to you through video, but for reasons of bereavement that Brother Carter and Brother General President have to give their priority to. So thank you both again for your time and joining us through video and making this available to the brothers in the District of Georgia. So do want to start for a moment and just, if you wouldn't mind, tell us about who you are. We got a lot of new brothers that have been initiated in our fraternity recently. So want to know who you are and talk to us about your Alpha resume. So if I would, I'll start with our 33rd General President, Brother Reverend Dr. Herman Skip Mason Jr.
And I'm going to yield to my mentor. There's only one or two brothers that were actually there the night I crossed into Alpha, and Brother Carter is one of those. He's a mentor as well, Brother Haston. So please, I would love for Brother Carter to begin, because throughout this session, most of the things he says, I'm just going to ditto. So we're going to get through this quickly. But please, Brother Carter.
Well, thank you, Brother General President. I'm John Carter, and I was made at the Iota chapter, Morris Brown College, on December 9th, 1967. I was the president of the Iota chapter, as well as Brother Mason, and the vice president of the chapter as well. I was president of the chapter when we were in 1970, International College Chapter of the Year. Have been involved throughout the years. As Brother Harrison mentioned, was the author of the first intake process standing orders, and then moved on to chair the committee that did the IMDP. And under Brother Mason's administration, was able to develop the protocol manual and get it through the General Convention in Las Vegas that Brother Mason presided over. Also worked on revisions to the chapter and officer guide. So I've been very involved in trying to help us document the true meaning of Alpha.
Thank you, Brother Carter. Brother 33rd?
Yes, thank you, Brother Haston, and thank you, Brother Carter. I'm Skip Mason. I too am a graduate of Morris Brown and a spring 1982 initiate of Iota chapter. Just celebrated a 41st anniversary. And, you know, I spent my time at Morris Brown in my early years in Ada Lambda chapter, really surrounded by giants and icons and legends, including Brother Carter and so many others who really influenced me. Many of us are blessed and were blessed to have great role models in the fraternity to see what Alpha is, what it was, and what it could be. And of course, Brother Carter is one of those. And we're blessed that he was our chapter advisor and advisor for many, many years. And the parties and gatherings at the home of Brother Carter and Sister Susan Gibson Carter, Mother Carter, to the Iota chapter brothers, are legendary. We had some great times there. I simply say all of that because, you know, part of this journey in Alpha is great fellowship, great teaching, and always in a continuous posture to learn, which is why I think this session that you're doing and what you've done throughout today is important, that we continue to pour into our brothers. You could find me always, and Brother Carter remembers this, I was always around the older brothers in Ada Lambda, Father Bowden, Andrew Lewis, to name a few. You know, just sitting there, listening to them recount stories of early days in Alpha, meeting jewels. I was blown away anytime somebody met a jewel. That one was just special. So, you know, that's kind of my story. I had the honor of serving as the president of Ada Lambda chapter, as president of Iota as well, and eventually served on the national level as a national archivist, chair of the historical commission, and had the dream somewhere to become the general president. And I was elected the 33rd General President and had the great fortune of helping to dedicate the Martin Luther King Jr. Memorial, which was almost a 20+ year project, of course, which Brother Carter had very much to do in the infancy of that project. So Brother Carter and I are chapter brothers, and we kind of joined at the hip somewhat as well. And I'm just honored to share this little time with him and with the brothers who are listening and watching.
Thank you there, Brother Mason. Thank you, Brother Carter. So throughout the session, Brother Reeves and I are going to be just asking questions and understanding the knowledge and the experiences and the stories that you have to share with the brotherhood about those things that you have seen in the course of your tenure within Alpha Phi Alpha. So one thing that I heard that you both said is that you were involved with the MLK Memorial Project. So if I may start there, and Brother Reeves, please by all means jump in whenever you feel the need to. Can you talk to us about your involvement with that project, how it started, and what happened in getting brothers engaged to support that? And I see Brother Carter's background there. I also have a brick here from the MLK Memorial that Brother Carter gifted to me. And so can you talk to us about just your experience and your involvement with that? And I'll give to Brother Carter.
Well, I sort of got involved in the MLK project like I've gotten involved in so many other things. My wife says to me before I go to the meeting, any meeting, don't come back in charge of anything. So I happened to, once we went through the moratorium, if you will, on intake or pledging, we started the process back, and it was a 1-weekend process. And I happened to mention to the General President that we need more time. We need to bring some of the traditions back. And as a result of that, he said, well, I want you to chair a committee to make some recommendations. As a result of that, I hosted a meeting at Bell South in Atlanta and brought in brothers from around the nation to help look at the process and really did a strategic analysis, because I'm somewhat of a strategic planner. And we did that strategic analysis, and we made a recommendation that we go to 2 weeks. It was that 1 weekend, went to 2 weeks, ultimately to 3 and to 4. But from that, I met Brother Adrian Wallace. So when Brother Wallace, just as he was getting ready to come into office, lo and behold, the project was approved. The legislation that authorized Alpha Alpha to build a memorial. I'm in the process of writing a book on that. But one of the things that people don't realize is that the memorial is actually in 3 phases, just like Alpha. The first phase, which I called, is the idea phase, that was actually done by George Seeley. George Seeley and a couple of guys who were in their 60s actually started the project. Seeley I said, we've got a city that's 75% Black, and there's not any memorials to African Americans on the mall, and we need one. And he determined that should be a memorial to MLK. So he went to his chapter in Silver Springs and asked them if they would endorse it as a project. They did. And then from there, they took it to the General Convention. And actually, the General Convention turned it down. And of course, Seeley was one who couldn't take no for an answer. So Seeley went up to the suite of the current General President at the time and said to him, this is something we need to do. So the next day, the General President did something unprecedented. He came down on the floor and said, brothers, this is something we should be approved. And it became a national project. And I recall going to conventions and seeing Seeley out in the lobby with a little bucket with a handwritten sign that says MLK Memorial, and people putting spare change in the bucket to help them get through it. The memorial, it has to have 3 pieces of legislation. One authorizes a memorial, and that memorial can be anywhere in Washington, D.C. So this first memorial was for anywhere in Washington, D.C. The second piece of legislation is to get it into Area 1. And then area 1 is split into 2 areas. So the next piece has to get it into the main area around the Lincoln and the Jefferson Washington Memorial. So just as Brother Wallace was coming into office, the legislation was passed. And it was like we've been chasing this bus for 13 years, and all of a sudden we catch it. The fraternity recognized that these guys who had done a phenomenal job with no money, a lot of effort on their own, and a lot of their own personal money and the help of their spouses to get it to this point, but they knew that they could not take it to the next phase. The next phase I call the realization phase. Having seen me work with the IMDP, Brother Wallace called me up, and I was at that time the vice president of AT&T. I was very busy. I had about 7,000 employees in 9 states, 14 lines of business, and extremely busy. And Brother Wallace called and asked if I would chair the project team to move it to the next phase. And I'm no fool, I said no. I said, I would love to do it, but I just don't have the time. And so a few weeks later, Brother Wallace, who was very quiet and persistent, came to me again and asked the question again. And I said, again, Brother Wallace, I just can't do it. The third time, I said, I got to get this guy off my back. So let me go to my management at Bell South to see if they would support me in this effort. And much to my surprise, when I went to Bell South said, not only will we support you in this effort, we will finance you, we will give you all the resources that we have at Bell South to help make this happen. So as a result of that, we pulled together the best minds in Alphas. And that's one of the great things about Alpha, is that you have some of the best minds that you can pull from. The difficult part of that is that we all leaders. So trying to herd those cats was very difficult and keep everybody in their lane. But we pulled together a project team that's better than any in the world. And with that project team, in 4 years, we accomplished a momentous task. We were told when we went to meet with the Park Service that you guys really got lucky. It normally takes about 50 years to get that first piece of legislation passed. It's probably going to take you guys another 40 or 50 years to get the second piece. What they didn't realize is that they were dealing with alphas. We got it done from concept of legislation through both houses of Congress and on the desk of the president in 12 months. We went back to the Park Service and they said, "Guys, you guys really got lucky, but this third piece is going to really take you a long time. Look at the Washington, how long it took. Look at the Lincoln, how long it took. Look at the World War II memorial." And in the middle of all of that, Eleanor Horne Norton passed a piece of legislation that said there should be no more memorials on the mall because of environmental concerns. But again, they didn't know they were talking to alphas. But they were right. It did take us longer to get the third piece passed. It took us 16 months. But you would think that once you got the legislation passed, then I could, because I retired in the middle of this to really concentrate on this memorial, and the AT&T continued to support me even after I retired. We had to then go get this. We had to get the site. We had to get the design. It was a lot of work that went into that. But after getting all of that set in place, then we turned it over to the third phase, which is the implementation phase, which is Harry Johnson. Now I could take your whole call talking about the MLK Memorial, but that's in a nutshell. It's how we actually got all of this done. And it took Harry then another, I believe, 11 years to get the memorial built.
And so, in Brother Carter, somewhere I read, somewhere I heard that when great men are made, alpha shall make them. I heard that somewhere. And like you say, it just goes and speaks to the power of what it means to be an alpha. Now, Brother General President Mason, so at some point you took the baton and took us over with this MLK Memorial. So we talked to us about your involvement and your experience with the memorial.
So I had the easy part, and that was to help to plan the celebration and the dedication of all of the hard work that had been done over the past 20 plus years. But I was an eyewitness to everything that Brother Carter has mentioned from his infancy. And, even I think under Ozell Sutton through Charles Teamer, through Henry Ponder, it was just barely moving. And I remember so well Brother Carter, Brother Sealy, and a group of old commergians, as I call them, sitting out at the table with buckets and harassing brothers as they passed by. And when Brother Carter said they were putting change in the bucket, literally dropping dollars and change in it, because we are alphas, but I don't think really anybody could see the big picture that we could put a monument to Dr. King. It reminds me of this Edgar Guest poem called "It Couldn't Be Done." And the first couple of lines says, somebody said that it couldn't be done, but he with a chuckle replied that maybe it couldn't, but he would be one who wouldn't say so till he tried. That was the gist of the Alpha movement and the power, and the men, the brothers like Brother Carter and the great team he assembled. Unfortunately, we don't always get the full story of the development of the memorial. And I'm glad to hear Brother Carter is writing a book, because there are so many pieces, so many components, so many men, so many corporations, so many efforts throughout to get it to. So by the time Brother Johnson got it, so much work had been done, and he took it literally. And what had to happen, much to the chagrin of many, he had to move it outside of the House of Alpha. Right. It could not be just Alpha's project anymore. Okay, this was a world project, and so we had to move. And brothers didn't really like that. Even some of the leadership did not like that. There was a separate foundation created. So I felt like it was my duty and task when I met with Harry and we talked, and he indicated that we were going to get this completed and dedicated during my administration. Then I said, I want to make sure that the world knows that Alpha Phi Alpha gave birth to this, that the world knows that Alpha Phi Alpha managed this and is dedicating it. And so that's what we attempted to do, to celebrate all of the components. But again, it took a lot of people, a lot of manpower, and much leadership. And we're grateful to Brother Carter. And I think it was AT&T, I think at the time, I don't think it was Bell South, but they're wrapping their hands around it. And I applaud Brother Wallace for coming back 3 times to ask. 3 is a special number. Biblically, spiritually, and in our fraternity as well. But he was persistent about it. But we tried to have a celebration that would say to the world that this is Alpha's. And so I've only been maybe once since we dedicated it. But I do take great pride in saying that I had a little to do with helping to bring this to a closure. Every Alpha should be proud.
Absolutely.
Of this monument, this memorial, and all that went into building and developing it. And so we had 2 dedications, August of 2011. That was the weekend that the fraternity gathered in DC, and there was also an earthquake as well, if you all remember. And so we ended up having to reschedule it with President Obama and Mrs. Obama and Vice President Biden, Mrs. Biden, and the Secretary of the Interior. That was the official dedication. And it was my honor to host the Vice President Biden then and Mrs. Biden and take them on a tour. Harry had President Obama, but it was just an honor, just an absolute honor to be able to be there for that. And so that's one of the great. Alpha will be known for many things, but that King Monument is what we shall be known for through perpetuity is the word I'm trying to say. Forever and a day, we shall be known for building this great monument.
Every time I fly into Washington, I say to myself, if they had known
Yeah.
the prominence of this thing, they would have fought us harder.
Yeah.
And the problem
They
is
didn't see it as well. Yeah.
no, they didn't see it.
This little black fraternity organization trying to do the impossible. Yeah. I agree with you, Brother Carter.
And brothers, should understand as well that everything was strategically planned, including the placement of the memorial, including the where Dr. King is facing. Everything was strategically done, and it was all done through the minds of alphas. Absolutely, the impact of Alpha Phi Alpha. So okay, so we started there at the MLK Memorial and talked about your influence, your impact there. I want to go backwards on the timeline for a second, because I heard something earlier as well. Brother Carter said that he was on campus at Morris Brown College in 1967. And so, Brother Carter, I want to talk about at that point, because again, here it is. You are a young college student from Thomaston, Georgia, that is on this campus at Morris Brown in 1967. And again, looking at the cultural aspects and impact of Alpha, how was it for you back then in 1967, and especially dealing with Alpha Phi Alpha?
Well, it was, of course, it was a very turbulent time. We had the demonstrations. I participated in those throughout the city of Atlanta AU Center. All the students were very much involved in those efforts. I will never forget the night that Dr. King was killed. My mother called and said, "Get yourself to Thomaston, Georgia." So I took the MARTA bus from Morris Brown to the Trailway bus station. The problem is that in 1968, very few, if any, of the bus drivers were Black. So as these white bus drivers were driving us to the bus station, people were throwing rocks at the bus as we went down, and you could hear the sirens and the city burning. And then when I got on the Trailway bus all the way down Terra Boulevard, Highway 19 to Thomaston, people were throwing rocks at the Trailway bus because all of the drivers were white as well. I convinced my parents to let me come back to the funeral. And so I stood on the bridge at Morris Brown and actually took some pictures. I took a few Polaroid pictures and watched that procession as it came all the way down what was Hunter Street, then Martin Luther King, all the way down, coming under the bridge to go to Morehouse. And our hearts were, it was just, our hearts were heavy as we watched that and as we experienced history. And then as we experienced the change, when we first came to Morris Brown, the theaters, we had a lot of, we had self-contained communities. We had our own Black theaters, our doctors, our pharmacists. Everything we needed was there around the current AU Center. We didn't go down, we couldn't go downtown and did not go downtown for things. And then right after that, things began to open up. And that's unfortunately when we abandoned our communities, but we actually lived through those changes that were occurring in the city of Atlanta and society.
And with that too, Brother Carter, you mentioned about the moments that you experienced right there during the civil rights movement. So what was it like for you as an alpha and the things that you contributed to the fraternity at that point? Because you look at historical images, you see where alpha was involved in that procession for Dr. King. So in wearing the badge and showing that alpha again has a presence and has always had a presence in those things that really matter. So what was it like for you as an alpha in dealing with that on the campus of Morris Brown College?
It was definitely a sense of pride. But I believe, and I have to be honest to say, that I think we were so overwhelmed as African Americans, and it really, that whole incident pulled us all together as African Americans who were struggling for our identity, that was really the overarching feelings that I had personally, and I believe most of us had. It did change us though. As you'll see in my book that I just released, it changed even what we did. The next year, the theme for homecoming was Back to Africa. And our Miss Morris Brown College, if you look in the yearbook, they were all pretty fair with straight hair, but not 1969. In 1969, it was Miss Maddie Elaine
Miller. Yeah.
Miss Maddie Elaine Miller was the color of my shirt. Beautiful, beautiful Black woman.
I've seen the yearbook pictures.
Oh, I mean, she was gorgeous. But I have to tell you a story that most people don't know. I was active with the student government, and we took a poll as to whether she should wear an afro in the homecoming parade. What do you think the outcome of the poll was?
I'm curious to know, Brother Carter.
Overwhelmingly no. So she did not wear an afro in the homecoming parade. Later on in the year, she started sporting an afro, but she did not in that parade.
Well, it was baby steps. At least they got a beautiful, dark-skinned queen.
And in fact, Miss Alpha was also a beautiful Black woman, Charlotte Hendricks. Can't think of her married name now.
And so moving into 1967, and with that understanding of the queens that were part of the Miss Black and Gold effort, if you would, at that point, let's move down that timeline to 1982. Brother Mason, so during your era and understanding the impact that you had in Alpha at that time, and I'll also take a moment to mention, since Brother Carter noted it, that you had a lot to do with providing the history of some of those queens that were very prominent and important in the Atlanta University Center. So Brother Mason, talk to us about what happened in 1982.
So as it turns out, I knew a little bit about Alpha, and the Alphas, when I arrived at Morris Brown as a sophomore, did not have a very strong presence on the yard at the time. The chapter was undergoing some transition. And in the fall of '81, they took over a line of 10. And that was a huge line, the talented 10th, as they were called. And in fact, I was on that line for all of maybe 3 days until they found out that I was a transfer student. I had transferred to Morris Brown. And so Dean Smothers put me and my line brother Earlis and another one off. And when we got put off, we said, "Oh, forget it. We ain't worried about Alpha. I'm through with it. I don't care about that." That's what we said until the spring informational meeting, and we were the first ones there back. And so it was 6 of us online, and we went over on a very dreary Sunday, and the date was April 4th, 1982. Mm-hmm. So we went over on the anniversary of Dr. King's assassination. And I did not forget that. That was very significant in my journey. Let me just say that I got into the chapter, excited about it, and the next thing I know, I became president of the chapter. It was kind of by fluke, and it was planned. The president who had been elected was on the fall line, and he was a good friend, but he told me he wasn't coming back to Morris Brown, and he wanted me to run for vice president. The brothers did not know that. And so he did not come back from Morris Brown, and the Constitution says the vice president, much to the chagrin of the brothers at the time. I was a neophyte. That's the last thing they wanted as president of the chapter, but I became president of the chapter. And I looked at the chapter history, the role model. First of all, Alpha, the only time it had won the National Chapter of the Year was when Brother Carter was president of the chapter. And I said, we can do this, and we began to put things together. We began to do the work. And so that next year, we became the Georgia Chapter of the Year. We beat Clark Alpha Phi because Alpha Phi had a hold on that award. You remember that, Brother Carter. Every year, Larry Hardy, I said, they're simply recycling the same thing. But we were smart enough to look at what they were doing. And the following year, we became the Georgia chapter of the year. And we went on to the regionals and so forth. But, you know, my whole time in my early years in Alpha, Brother Hairston, is sort of interesting because I was just going to be that Alpha. I wasn't thinking about going to a national convention, and I wasn't thinking about running for any kind of office regionally. I was working for Upward Bound that summer. And some of my guys got into some trouble, and the director said I was responsible, so you cannot go on the trip to DC with Upward Bound. So that left me with no other option but to go to New Orleans for my first national convention. When I tell you, Brother Haston and Brother Carter knows this, New Orleans changed my whole trajectory. That's why I encourage brothers, neophytes especially, you need to make your way to Dallas, Texas, by hook or crook. Try to register if you can, but be there in that atmosphere. It was there in New Orleans. I took a train. In fact, the train ticket was not even in my name. The brother that was supposed to go, Chaim Andrades, could not go. So I ended up going on his ticket. During that time, they didn't ask for IDs and all. You could just get on the train, a plane, and ride it and so forth. But I went to that convention, Mario, and my life was changed. I saw all of the luminaries. But what really changed me was when they announced that Brother Charles Harris Wesley, the 14th General President, was at the convention. And I made my way all the way up to the front. There was a line yay long, and I waited because I wanted to meet the man who wrote the history book and who painted the picture of the founding of our fraternity. And I stood in line, and finally it was my turn, and I got on my knee because I felt the reverence. I had a buddy of mine snap the picture. We exchanged the fraternal grip. He patted my hand. He asked me where I was from. He told me to be a good Alpha. That was a life-changing moment for me in the fraternity. And I pray that every brother will get an opportunity to have a life-changing moment that changes your trajectory of what this fraternity is about. And not only that, but what you can give and do. But Morris Brown was a wonderful place to be in the 80s. Greek life was abundant. I was a member of the Marching Wolverines band, as Brother Carter was back in the day. And so we would travel to games, and brothers would be everywhere. I mean, it's amazing when you become a part of the fraternity, how brothers just seem to stand out. We started going to Eta Lambda chapter meetings, you know, and so my transition into Eta Lambda was a smooth transition. And again, like I said earlier, all of the luminaries were there. You still had James P. Brawley, who would come occasionally, who was the president emeritus of Clark College then, and Hugh Gloucester, and all of these wonderful men, A.J. Lewis and Father Bound, one of the founders of Alpha Rho. So I immersed myself. And let me just say this, in this fraternity, all I ever wanted to do was to be the historian. That's all. I had no desire to be general president. Some of my brothers would dispute me on that, but I really didn't. I just wanted to pick up the mantle and become the historian of the fraternity, but that never happened. So I sought some other options, if you will. But college days swiftly passed, imbued with memories fun. There are no more beautiful lines written in any song because we reflect on those wonderful days, you know, those who went to became a member during their college days, and it was a great time for me.
Brother Third, you mentioned something. You mentioned that when you met Brother Wesley, he said, "Be a good Alpha."
Be a good Alpha.
And that translates over for me about the Alpha brand. So, you know, listening to both of you talk about your experiences, Brother Carter saying that he was there with the processional and viewing that, and remember the night when Brother Dr. King was assassinated. Brother Mason, you said you were initiated and you crossed on April the 4th in 1982 when that happened. And here it is, both of you had such an impact with the MLK Memorial, dedicating it to someone that you both remark about. So being a good Alpha and the Alpha brand, want to hear from both of you, if you would, and start with you, Brother 33rd. What drew you to Alpha? What made you say, I want to be a part of this brotherhood?
So I saw the roster of men who were Alphas. Your Senator Edward Brooke, your Thurgood Marshall, your W.E.B. Du Bois, and then Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And I said, what? Dr. King was a member of a fraternity? I knew that I wanted to be a part of that organization. We went to the Smoker, as it was called during that time. And the brothers put on a great presentation about the fraternity. And I heard the word scholarship and manly deeds, and I that they were engaged and involved. So I wanted to be a part of such a group, and it influenced me, to seek and to try to become. And I have not one single regret. It is the absolute best decision that I've made in my fraternity and in my life, being a part of this fraternity. And when Brother Wesley said, be a good alpha, that was kind of a charge to try to do the very best that you can. Not be a perfect alpha, because we as men are humans and we're flawed and we're subject to imperfections and we make mistakes, but to be as good of alpha as you can be. And so I've tried to do just that, and Brother Carter and I like to write, and when you write a book, it leaves a legacy. You leave something behind. And I'm very proud of the publications that I've contributed to the fraternity: History of Ada Lambda Chapter, History of the Southern Region, The Talented Tenth on the Jewels, my historical moments that I used to send out when the internet was new and fresh, and then the quotes from the Jewels. So in my own very small way, I've just tried to contribute to the canon of the fraternity to help us to be the very best alpha that we could be.
Let me say that, Brother Mason, I hope that you will take those historical moments and put them into a book.
Yeah.
There's so much good information in there, and I use it all the time. I found it on the website, on the World Wide Web. I copied it for fear that next time I go, it won't be there. But I think you ought to put those in a book. I think they're really worth sharing for new brothers. But I have to tell you, most people don't know it. I almost became the Q. My freshman year, I had 5 friends, and we did everything together. We were determined we were going to all be lawyers and we were going to be great guys. And the Qs, who were the national Omega Psi Phi chapter that year, my freshman year, some of these guys went on to Harvard and Yale, and from Morris Brown in 1967 and 8, unheard of. And so these guys were like me, they were running the campus, and all the Greeks were outstanding. But they courted us. They took us to movies, they did all kinds of things, and they courted us, and they had us convinced that Omega was the only way to go. But there was something in the stars. And as I began to observe and to look, now, first of all, I just couldn't see myself being painted purple and with a dog chain around my neck. And there was a young man on campus, Frank Jenkins, who was the longtime controller of the organization. Frank wore a suit every day. I've later found out it's because he worked as an accountant or assistant accountant off campus for one of the professors. But I just thought the man didn't own anything other than suits. And he was professional each and every day. And I saw that professionalism in him and other alphas. And I too saw the list of men who were alphas. So when it came time to write our letters, my friends wrote their letters to Omega, and I alone wrote my letter to Alpha Phi Alpha. Again, one of the best decisions that I've made in my life. It has certainly changed me. It has exposed me to people around the world. I could pick up the phone now and say to him, brother, I'm coming to Saudi Arabia. And he will say to me, what time are you arriving and when can I pick you up? And that's the kind of organization that we are part of. But most importantly, I think Alpha has also allowed me to be able to influence other people as well. I was an advisor, as Brother Mason said, for 25 years at Morris Brown. When I went to my financial planner and told him that I was an advisor to a college fraternity, he said, are you out of your blank mind? And he said, you are putting not only your assets, but the assets of your family at risk. Because if somebody is sued, you're going to get sued as well. And so he said, the only way I would recommend you continue this is that you take out an umbrella policy. So he had me to take out an umbrella policy to protect myself, because there was no way I was going to give it up. And so I feel that Alpha has allowed me to be able to impact other people. But you talk about the brand. It's interesting that we were at the leadership conference under Brother Bob Willis. We had a district conference, and there were some things that went on, especially among the college brothers, that Brother Willis did not like, and none of us liked. And I went to Brother Willis, opening my mouth again, and I said, Brother Willis, these guys don't know, and somebody needs to teach them. He said, well, why don't you do something about it? So as a result of that, I actually, in 1992, had the first Georgia Leadership Conference. We held it at the old Ada Lambda Alpha Community Center. And in that, we began to talk about the brand. What is the brand? What's the role of a president? What's the role of a secretary? And so we began to put that together. And out of that, I still began to see that there were older brothers who were in Ada Lambda, whose feet I would sit at as well, that would say, this is what we do in Alpha. But I kept saying to myself, where is it written? So I kept saying in my mind, I think we need a protocol manual. And thinking that, Brother Ellis Albright called me and said, Brother Carter, we need a protocol manual. And the two minds came together, and I pulled together a team, and everything I do is a team. We pulled together a team to develop a draft of a protocol manual, talking to brothers, trying to understand what is Alpha Tau, because it was never defined. What is manly deed? It was never defined. What is a private program? What is a public program? None of that was defined. And if you're going to have a brand, you've got to be able to define it. The problem with that is that we had an executive director at the time that was stonewalling, that would not pull this thing forward, would not bring it to the board. But fortunately, Alpha had a progressive general president named Herman Skip Mason. And Brother Mason said to me in the elevator once, after a very challenging IMDP session, and he said, Brother Carter, what do you want? You remember that, Brother Mason? We got in the elevator. I said, Brother Mason, I want you to help me get the protocol manual through. And as a result of that, Brother Mason got that protocol manual to the floor of the convention and got it through. It defines who we are. Now, it's my only disappointment is that it is 10 years old and has never been updated, which it needs to be. But that defines who we are. And if an organization is going to maintain a brand, you've got to write it down. I'll tell you something else that also inspired me is that my son became an Alpha in 1992. And as he would come home from Hampton University, he would tell me all these revelations about Alpha that he had learned, like what was the meaning of that little fluffy stuff around the coat of arms, and what was the meaning of those little finks in there. And of course, none of it was true, but that's what he knew. And I said, we need to come up with a way that we can dispel a lot of these myths. And so we put all of that into a protocol manual that hopefully will continue to guide who we are.
And I, I hear you, Brother Carter, and I can say as well that, the work that Alpha has done in developing protocol and etiquette, it's something that other organizations have taken the lead of Alpha, or taken from Alpha, and have developed their own as well. And so you see folks now that are doing some of the things that are similar to what we do. And of course, we say that it all started with Alpha, as always. So, brothers, I do have a couple more questions for you tonight. And of course, I'll let you go with your time. So one thing I did want to ask, I heard that, Brother Carter, you mentioned that you said that you wrote several of our trusted documents. Brother Mason, you said that you wrote some of our documents, including history of chapters, etc., and providing these awesome historical moments. And then looking at it from a fraternity culture perspective, what was important to you in making sure that those documents became those things, if you would, that all alphas knew about and all alphas abided by, if you would. So, and if you want to start with you, Brother Carter.
Well, one thing is I have 3 grandsons, and I want them to be alphas. And so the alpha that they come into, I want them to come into the alpha that the jewels envision. And the only way you're going to do that is to have a standard, agreed upon set of values. And so that's why I work so hard to document those. Also, being a college advisor really opens your eyes, because you're seeing a new group of young men come in every year. They have no idea. Unless I told them about the chapter and officer guide, they would never know it was there. And I kept all that in mind when we were also developing the IMDP and writing the lectures for IMDP, that what we need to do is to let people know it's not only to put a document out there, but you got to also make it available to the individuals. And that when new chapter officers like a Brother Mason as a neophyte president, he needs to have tools that have already been worked out that he can rely on that will help make him and the chapter successful.
Thank you, Brother Carter. And Brother 33rd, in terms of, you've wrote the history of the Eta Lambda chapter. You wrote other documents even about the history of Atlanta. So talk to us, if you would, about, again, your wanting and reasoning for writing those documents.
Well, I thought, one, they were necessary, that knowledge is power. They had not been done. Eta Lambda had a rich history, but it did not have a printed, published history. Not only did we do the history, but we also did a documentary as well at the 75th anniversary. The same for the Southern region. I talked to Brother Bob Willis, and I chuckled when Brother Carter said that Bob Willis told Brother Carter, "Well, do something about it." That's what he said to me. Well, go ahead and do the history. That's Bob Willis's way, of endorsing it. I did the Talented 10th. Because we didn't have anything in hand on the jewels, and I remember when as I was running for general president, Brother Carter had to remind me many times. He may not remember this. He said, "Now, Alpha is electing a general president. They're not electing a historian." They knew how much I loved the history of this fraternity. But when I became general president, I wanted to still make sure that the history was there, that it was taught, that it was included, that there were pertinent things that the fraternity should know, that members should know. I put out a couple of books, book of quotes on the jewels that is still being used, and I hope that they will reprint that as well as the general president. The more we read, the more we know, which is why the protocol manual was a done deal. And when you're able to get something passed on the floor at the General Convention, it is worthy to be celebrated, because you know how our brothers are. But it was time. It was necessary, and it is time for an update on that protocol manual, because when we teach protocol, we teach the order, the systems, the culture, and the history of our organization. There's a sorority that we know who is protocol crazy in a good way. The AKAs, they've taken protocol to another whole level. Yes, okay. Indeed. They have protocol directors for chapters, for states, for regions, the whole 9 yards, but they get it and they understand that. So, I think we have to continue to espouse these virtues and ideas. And there are a couple of things, Brother Hairston, that I want to say as I close out. In the spirit of Brother Carter and all of the wonderful brothers who taught us how to be alphas. You have to be, you can become an alpha, but you have to learn how to be an alpha, okay? And as Brother Woodruff said, to be an alpha means more than just to wear a pin. Okay, so something that I kind of shared and developed, an alpha man, and I borrowed these from Brother Robert Franklin. A few of these is well versed. He can engage in conversations, well traveled. Every alpha man ought to desire to want to travel to Egypt, right, Brother Carter?
Yes,
and face the Sphinx and to pose in front of the Sphinx. An alpha man is well read. He reads often, and can converse about those things that he's read. Well dressed, well spoken, always has an encouraging word for a young brother or a new brother, not cunning, conniving, scheming, because there is no place in our organization that espouses brotherhood. Even if he disagrees, he does it with respect. The alpha man, the brother, gives his very best, and he gives the very best that he can. He lifts up, not tears down. He cheers on his other brothers, not envious or jealous. And the alpha man gives life to the fraternal idea. And so I kind of wanted to, just kind of close with that, because I've experienced both the highs and the lows of the fraternity. And you cannot become general president of this organization without having tasted both of those. But as I said, I wouldn't trade anything for my journey. And I'm grateful for this opportunity to share with Brother Carter, but also to continue, to espouse that, we have a great organization, but it is only as great as the men who make it. And those who make it need to really understand what it means to be an alpha.
Absolutely. And Brother General President, I'm waiting for that to be published so I can be the first one to get one of those there. But listening to both of you brothers, I hope brothers that are listening to us engage in this dialogue, and brothers who were initiated in 2023 versus brothers who were initiated in 1963 are getting some type of information and knowledge from this discussion. So brothers, I have one final question for you. So in that, college days have swiftly passed, and of course, and be what memories fun. Where do you see Alpha in this next generation? And what is your hope for the brotherhood? And I'll start with you, Brother Carter.
Good question. Let me give you my hope, okay? I hope that Alpha will understand that Alpha is beyond these four walls of the United States, that Alpha is an international organization as envisioned by the Jewels, that businesses now are intercontinental, and that we have got to address or adjust our policies, our procedures. Everything has to be looking internationally if we are going to survive. The pool of candidates are international. In the England chapter, we just took over two brothers, both one born in England, grew up in the United States and has returned to England to live. Another one, born in Ghana, grew up in the United States and is now in the United States military in England. There are brothers out there that want to become a part of this vote. So I'm hoping that as we move forward, that we open our minds and our hearts and embrace all of Alpha, that we continue to stick to the values of the Jewels, the values that are outlined in the protocol manual, and that we also remain brotherly. And remaining brotherly, that is all. If we don't have that fire, why be here?
Thank you, Brother Carter.
Thank you for asking me.
Brother 33rd.
Yes, indeed. I echo everything Brother Carter has said. We got to continue to think globally. And Brother Carter said during my administration that we need to charter a chapter in London. And we did just that. We traveled there. It was a glorious occasion. We also did South Africa and Liberia. And so I'm honored that those were chartered under my administration. But we need to continue to think globally, because even in African cities with a population of 2, we even have a brother there. I'm headed to Ghana in May, and I've already reached out to Brother T. Nelson Williams, who has connected me with the brothers in Ghana, and then the brothers from Liberia want to travel. We must continue to think globally and internationally. We have a challenge, we know, with many of our institutions, many of our schools, and even some of our regions. When I said at the last board meeting about they don't have the pool that many chapters have to pour from to select capable and qualified men. And so that's something that we have to work on in order to continue to prepare young men for the Alpha Phi Alpha experience, and then to make sure that those who have experienced it continue to be committed, to it. I mean, even during the time that I was not active with the fraternity, I never lost my love for the fraternity. Now there may have been some brothers I didn't really care for, but I never lost my love for the fraternity, which is why I can be back and walk with my head held high, because Alpha has been very good to me. And I owe a great deal of debt and gratitude to this fraternity and so many wonderful brothers who have poured into my spirit. And also, I want to be a part of the Alpha that I want to see my son, who's a college student, who will hopefully one day become a member of it. So I can't stand on the sideline and look. I want to make sure that I do what I can do. We're still a great organization. My only little pet peeve, and I'm gonna say this, and you may cut it out if you want. This grit that the brothers do, I can't get into it. I know they do it, this hard, manly kind of thing, but that's a pet peeve of mine. And it's just who I am. You don't have to grit to show your manhood. You show your manhood by the things that you do, by your scholarship and the way that you treat people. But that's a little pet peeve of mine. It's not going anywhere. Y'all can still grit hard on pictures and do all of those kinds of things. But that's just the old fashionedness in me. But thank you, Brother Haston, for this opportunity, and Brother Reeves, to share with Brother Carter, and to all of the brothers that are watching, neophytes and prophytes and all in between, and to our distinguished district director, Brother Ford, who listens to me every now and then. He used to listen to me more, but since he's become district director, you know how that goes. But I'm honored, and thank you for inviting me to be a part of this.
Thank you there, Brother Mason. So, Brother Reeves, are there any comments and closing comments from you there?
I just want to thank brothers Dr. Carter and Dr. Mason for the valued information they actually provided this evening. They have a wealth of knowledge, and this is just, as the cliche says, tip of the iceberg of the knowledge that they have. We only see the tip of the iceberg, and if you go beneath the water, it goes much deeper than what we can see. And so I just encourage the brothers to actually reach out to brothers Carter and Brother Mason and other veteran brothers like them to get information, because that helps us with our journey in Alpha. And again, thank you, Brother Doctors Carter and Mason, for the information you all provided this evening.
Thank you, Brother Reeves. And as you've heard these awesome brothers say, they have this history and some of this knowledge documented. And there's more to come in their documentation in terms of what it is. So I know that Brother Dr. Carter has books that are available on Amazon. Same thing with Brother Mason. So, and of course, I'm sure that if you see these brothers, they'd be more than happy to, number one, share their knowledge with you, but also direct you in terms of where you can receive them. So, brothers, we've talked about, and as we said, first of all, this is going to be a historical keynote session. And I cannot thank you both enough. I've learned more about you than I knew. I didn't know that both of you were in the Marching Wolverines. I'm gonna call you out on that on one of these days. I want to see what you still got. So I'm happy to hear that part about it.
But I'm kicking but not high, Brother Haston. I tell you.
But I thank you, brothers, for talking to us about, again, looking at it, the history of Alpha, protocol and etiquette, talking about the Alpha brand, looking at the fraternity history and culture, and then tying it up, and I will give credit to Brother Reeves for this, about to be an Alpha man and knowing all about Alpha and what it means to be Alpha and have that brotherhood. And I'll close, brothers, by saying, as I've heard, both of you brothers talk, and I heard Brother 33rd say this, somewhere I read, somewhere I heard, that I know the decision I made. And of course, it talks about being an Alpha, because you are never heavy. You are always my brother.
That's right.
Thank you, brothers, for your time. And of course, I will be calling on you again because I do want to have more discussion and more dialogue that you presented to us tonight. So thank you both. Thank you, Brother Reese, for joining us. And I bid you brothers a good night. And again, thank you for your time.
Thank you.